Hey guys, and welcome back to my true crime channel, Bedtime Crime. Today we are going to be looking at the case of JonBenet Ramsey, and this is going to kick off the new series on my channel, which is Unsolved Murders and Unsolved Crimes. And I thought this one would be the perfect little transition into this new series because JonBenet Ramsey's case is very much a highly public and very talked about true crime case, and it's almost, I would call it almost like a celebrity case a little bit. So we're kind of mixing the two worlds of celebrity cases, which is the series I just ended, and now we're going into Unsolved Murders, so I wanted to kind of blend those two just for the perfect seamless transition into this new series. So I also just like to put disclaimers at the beginning of my videos in case certain things trigger certain people. So for this video, we are obviously going to be talking about the murder of a 6-year-old girl. If reading or watching or consuming anything about children in true crime makes you uncomfortable, makes you sad, your mental health should come first, so please do not continue watching this video. I have plenty of other true crime cases and videos about adults that don't involve children, so just want to put that out there right at the beginning because I know that some people are uncomfortable consuming true crime content that has to do with children. I also wanted to just talk about, since my new series is starting, the Unsolved Murder series, I wanted to, put it out there that we obviously know how most of these end, which is very unsatisfying the way that a lot of these cases end because we don't have answers for all of these cases, and in most of these cases we don't really have any answers at all. We just have the evidence that we have and nothing to do with it. So if you are somebody who gets frustrated easily when cases aren't solved, again, this series will not be for you. Now, I'm going to do what I can in today's case and in these future unsolved murder cases to present you guys with all the facts, evidence, research that you need to come up with your own conclusion of what happens. But with these cases, I do ask that we do not speculate. I will not be speculating, and I hope that you guys will not be speculating. And please do not send hate to anybody. Even if you think that somebody is responsible for a certain crime, please do not send hate to them because we cannot prove any of these things, and if they could, they would have already been in jail. So the most important thing that I always advocate for on my channel is the victim's rights, the victim's stories. So I just think that spreading awareness is one of the best ways to get more eyes on these cases, and hopefully we can start to see more progress in a lot of these cases in terms of them being solved. So with all that being said, I know that was kind of a lengthy intro, let's just get into the case of JonBenet Ramsey. JonBenet Patricia Ramsey was born August 6th, 1990 in Atlanta, Georgia, to parents John and Patsy Ramsey. And JonBenet's name is actually inspired from her dad's name, which is JonBenet, and her middle name is from her mom's name, Patricia. Now, John was a software executive, and both her parents were extremely affluent. We're talking their net worth at the time of JonBenet's death was about $6.4 million a year. So they were making bank. They were multi-millionaires living, a very affluent and luxurious lifestyle. They lived in a very nice house in Boulder, Colorado, where they had moved to after JonBenet was a little bit older. They moved out of Atlanta, Georgia into Boulder, Colorado. JonBenet also actually had an older brother named Burke, who is 3 years older than her. And she also had 3 other half-siblings, John, Andrew, Melinda, and Elizabeth. And by the age of 6, JonBenet had already won many beauty pageant titles, including Little Miss Colorado, Little Miss Charlevoix, Colorado State All-Star Kids Cover Girl, America's Royale Miss, and National Tiny Miss Beauty. She was really into the beauty pageant lifestyle, and her mom was really into it with her. Patsy, her mother, was also a former beauty queen, pageant queen. She was Miss West Virginia of 1977, and that is why she wanted to start getting JonBenet involved in this world at a young age as well. Getting into the night at hand, December 26th, 1996, John and Patsy had woken up early that morning since they were preparing to go on a trip to Atlanta, Georgia, and they had booked a private flight for very early in the morning. And They went to JonBenet's room, you know, to wake her up and everything, and found that she was missing from her bed, that she wasn't in bed. And as they were searching the house for her, Patsy found a ransom note at the bottom of the staircase, which was demanding $118,000 if they wanted JonBenet to return home safely to them. Now, something interesting about this ransom total is that this is the exact amount that JonBenet's father, had recently received as a bonus. The note had warned not to involve police or else, you know, bad things would happen. However, Patsy, you know, was freaking out and immediately called the authorities at 5:52 a.m. And I'll play the 911 call for you right now.
911 emergency.
Police.
What's going on?
515th Street.
What's going on there, ma'am?
We have a kidnapping. Hurry, please.
Explain to me what's going on, okay?
There's a note left and our daughter's gone.
A note was left and your daughter is gone? How old is your daughter?
6 years old. She's gone. 6 years old.
How long ago was this?
I don't know. I just found the note. And my daughter's
Does it say who took her?
What?
Does it say who took her?
I don't know. There's a ransom note here.
It's a ransom note?
It says SBTC. Victory. Please.
Okay, what's your name? Are you
Patsy Ramsey. I'm the mother. Oh my God. Please.
Okay, I'm sending an officer over, okay?
Please.
Do you know how long she's been
No,
gone?
I don't. Please, we just got out. Is she right here? Oh my God, please.
Okay,
Please, there's somebody.
I am, honey.
Please.
Take a deep breath for me,
Please,
okay?
hurry.
Patsy, 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 Patsy.
In addition to the police, Patsy wanted all of her friends and family to come over as well, and she called all of them up to help search for JonBenet around the house and see if they could find anything. And police arrived at the house at about 5:55 a.m. and they did not see any signs of forced entry, so that was kind of, you know, the first thing that they had noticed. And mostly the police they did not view the house as a crime scene. They were waiting for the kidnappers, who said in the ransom note that they were going to call around 8 or 10 a.m. to, you know, negotiate JonBenet's safe return and be able to negotiate the amount that they wanted and everything like that. So the police were really treating this as a kidnapping case and just waiting for this call from these kidnappers. They were basically letting everybody just walk around and do, you know, whatever they wanted, just look for things, like any signs as to who could have taken JonBenet, but they did not treat the house as a crime scene like they probably should have. And there were many ways that this entire case could have been handled better from the start by the police. For example, they didn't even search the entire house for JonBenet, so they basically took the ransom note that the parents had given them and were like, okay, so we'll just wait for these kidnappers, you know, to call, instead of searching the house, searching just in case she was still in the house, even for just evidence of something that the kidnappers could have left behind. They didn't really do any of that. They didn't really search. They also only cornered off JonBenet's room rather than the entire house. So they did treat JonBenet's room as a crime scene, but the rest of the house was free reign for anybody just to walk around and contaminate possible evidence. And the police shared evidence they had found with the parents, which is not a very common thing. Usually police, you know, in investigations, they will keep all their evidence to themselves and they will not release things until they are absolutely sure that it will not compromise the case in any way. Whereas the police were just sharing everything that they were finding with the parents. They were just talking to the parents openly about the case. And they didn't interview the parents about this kidnapping or what happened the night before or you know, like anything leading up to this kidnapping until way later, after other things had already been revealed, which gave the parents plenty of time to corroborate their stories. I'm not saying that the parents were lying in any way. I'm just saying there's a reason why the police typically interview people right away and why they do it separately is because they want to get the 100% honest truth and they want to see if anybody's lying about anything, and they can do that if they get their initial story and they can see if everybody's story matches up with everybody else's. At 1 p.m. that day, the detectives had instructed John and one of his close family friends to look around the house one more time and see if there was anything that they could have missed and just check everywhere. You know, they didn't know the house as well, so they just told them, if you see anything interesting, just let one of the detectives know, which again is very out of the ordinary for detectives. Detectives typically will block off the entire house and not let anybody come in, and they will do their own investigation. It's very odd that they sent the parents down to do it, but now the first place that John and his close family friend went to was the basement, where the police had failed to check, one of the places that the police hadn't even looked in. And they actually did find JonBenet's body. Now John immediately, of course, was devastated. That's his little 6-year-old girl, and scared, so he, picked up his daughter and took her upstairs. And this was a very impulsive move. It's understandable to us if we were to lose, a child. Of course, your impulse is going to be to hold the child and try to get help for the child. However, this is why it's so important that the police handle these things, because by touching his daughter's body, he contaminated anything that was really on her with his DNA, and he contaminated possible evidence, and he also disturbed the entire crime scene. The police weren't able to see what position she was in, the police weren't able to see where in the basement she was at, the entire crime scene was basically disturbed, and although John probably didn't mean to do that, this is why the police need to take charge of these things, When JonBenet's body was found, her mouth was covered with duct tape, and she had her wrists and her neck were all being bound by a white cord. Her torso was actually being covered with a white blanket, so it was only her head sticking out, really. Her head and her feet that were sticking out when her father found her. Now, after the results of JonBenet's autopsy were finalized and released, it was revealed that the cause of death was asphyxiation due to strangulation, and the manner was homicide. They were able to find what they believed to have been a makeshift garrote using a length of cord and part of a paintbrush, which belongs to Patsy in the basement. And a makeshift garrote is basically something used to strangle people, essentially. So this is what they believe was the murder weapon, essentially. And there was also a deep ligature around her neck and another around her right wrist, which was evidence of being bound and strangled. And she was also found to have an 8.5-inch skull fracture, most likely from being hit with a very blunt object. She appeared to have been wiped clean in her lower body, and there were also abrasions and blood around her lower body, which was possible signs of sexual assault, but they were not necessarily able to prove that rape or sexual assault 100% did happen, but they are, based off of their findings around that area, they do believe that something might have happened. And something else that was interesting when looking at the contents of her stomach at the time was there was still pineapple, undigested, left in her stomach, and her parents had claimed that they didn't give her any pineapple the night before her death, which doesn't really add up because the pineapple wouldn't have still been in her stomach. The pineapple was very freshly eaten, it was undigested. However, despite the parents saying that that they did not give her any pineapple, there was a bowl in the kitchen filled with pineapple, and this had Burke's fingerprints on it actually, which was JonBenet's older brother. This didn't do much, however, this piece of evidence, because fingerprints could have gotten there any time on that bowl. That could have been a common bowl that Burke touched. That could have been, it wasn't as easy to just say, okay, then Burke was responsible. And Patsy and John also came out and said that Burke was in his room all night. He was fast asleep. The minute that they said goodnight to him, he was in his room. Now, Patsy and John were actually very cooperative with the police during their investigation and gave them plenty of DNA samples and anything else that they asked for that could aid in the help of the investigation. The DNA that came back from JonBenet's body was not able to be traced back to her family or her close inner circle based off of the samples that they were given, but it was actually traced to an unidentified male, which basically means that the DNA that they found, they do not know the exact person that it can be traced back to, but they do know that it is a male. Now, on December 29th of 1996, which was 3 days after JonBenet's body was found, Patsy, John, and Burke all flew to Atlanta, Georgia, which is where they originally were planning to fly to that day. And on New Year's Eve, JonBenet was laid to rest in Marietta, Georgia. And her grave was actually right beside her older half-sister, who I mentioned earlier, Elizabeth. And Elizabeth had actually died in a car accident in 1992, so she was buried right next to her. Now, in January of 1997, Patsy and John actually gave their very first TV interview for CNN.
When you return to Boulder, you will sit down with the Boulder police?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We want them to know everything possible.
Everything.
That could help them.
Whatever they want, whatever anyone wants, we will cooperate.
Again, it's a mystery at this point. Do you truly think the perpetrator will be found?
I'd hope that she was still okay, but I could tell that she probably wasn't. I screamed and carried her upstairs.
You believe it's someone outside your home?
There is a killer on the
Absolutely.
loose. I don't know who it is. I don't know if it's a he or a she. But if I were a resident of Boulder, I will tell my friends to keep your babies close to you. There's someone out there.
And during this time that they went on to do this interview, the police was telling the entire Boulder community that there was no need to be afraid, there was no killer on the loose, there was no, killer at large out there. However, Patsy went on to disagree with this and told everyone that if they lived in Boulder, they should take every measure to keep their children safe, and that she does believe that there's still a killer out there, and that being a parent, she is scared also. And in March, John did a handwriting analysis to discover if the ransom note could have been written by him, and he was cleared of this. His handwriting didn't match. However, Patsy was not ruled out as someone who could have written it. On the 19th of April, the Boulder District Attorney's Office officially named Patsy and John as persons of interest in the murder of JonBenet. And in 1998, so a year after their CNN interview, a grand jury was convened and spent months poring over all the evidence from the case, all of the facts that they had. And in October of 1999, so another year later, the grand jury was dismissed after it was found that there was not sufficient evidence to be able to take the case to trial or to charge anyone with the crime. And this same year, 1999, Berg, who is now 12 years old, was cleared of all charges. He was found to have no involvement in it. And in 2001, the whole family actually released a memoir titled The Death of Innocence, which was about them losing their daughter, which was about them being blamed for the death of their daughter, and how they still are affected every day by this, and what it's like to have an entire nation believe that you did something that they claim they did not do. Now, in 2006, Patsy actually died of ovarian cancer at the age of only 49. However, she had maintained her innocence until the very end and said she had nothing to do with the death of her daughter. And she was buried next to JonBenet in Marietta, Georgia. And in 2008, there was actually new advancements in the world of DNA evidence. We've come a long way. And the police were able to clear the entire Ramsey family of any involvement. And the Boulder police actually sent out an apology letter to the Ramsey family for what they had to go through in terms of the media scrutiny, in terms of just the public image of themselves, always being blamed for something that they said that they didn't do, and now the police were able to prove that they did not do it. Now, as of November of 2022, so pretty recently, the Boulder police actually released that they're opening back up the investigation, and after all the advancements that we have made in terms of crime solving, they are hopeful they'll be able to solve once and for all who was responsible for JonBenet's murder. That's basically the story of everything that happened with JonBenet. I do think that it's going to be useful to look into a couple of theories that have gone around. Like I said at the beginning, I don't think it's good to speculate. However, there's a couple that do have some facts that I think are worth noting. There was a teacher named John Mark Carr who actually came out the same year that Patsy died and said that he was responsible for the murder of JonBenet Ramsey, and said that he had kidnapped her and accidentally killed her, and he was just coming forward with the murder. And he was taken in and charged with the murder, but however, he was cleared because his DNA samples did not match those that were at the scene, so he was released after only 2 weeks. And of course, the most popular theory of what happened to JonBenet to this day is that her parents had something to do with it in one way or another and forged the ransom note to make it seem like she had been kidnapped. There's a few reasons why people believe that they are guilty and why the police originally believed that they were guilty. First, John and Patsy would give inconsistent stories. Their stories didn't always match each other's stories, and their stories would not always be the exact same each time they told it. And people also didn't like how they would give so many media appearances and do so many different kinds of interviews with different people. But when the police wanted to question them about everything that had happened, they would say that they were in too emotional and fragile of a state to be able to do that. And this made the police a little suspicious because they were able to do the interviews just fine, but they weren't able to talk to police. In addition to these things, the ransom note was actually written on paper that they found inside of their house. And when retrieving fibers from the duct tape that was on JonBenet's mouth, it was also found that the fibers on the duct tape matched fibers found on Patsy's clothing, which was a little suspicious. Of course, some smaller theories that are just things that people have speculated about are that perhaps someone close to the family did it, such as the housekeeper or the electrician. Some of those have, very deep kind of Reddit style forums all dedicated to those kind of theories. I don't feel comfortable speculating about those because they're all speculation. There's never been any evidence of this, and none of these people have ever been formally charged. Even the parents have never been formally charged. And that's where we are today. There's been new updates in terms of opening the case and the fact that DNA evidence has come such a long way and is able to solve so many crimes. We see cold cases from 50 years ago that are now able to be solved using this new technology and new DNA evidence. So everybody is really hopeful that JonBenet will get justice, and I think that that's the biggest thing, is that JonBenet gets to rest easy and gets to have her killer get some kind of punishment for what he or she did. So, with all of that being said, I hope you enjoyed hearing about the case of JonBenet Ramsey. I hope maybe that you learned something that you didn't already know about the case. I know the case is very public and a lot of people know a lot about this case, so I hope I did it justice. And if there are any unsolved murders that you guys are interested in hearing about, I would love to hear them if you want to leave them down in the comments. And if you liked this video, please like this video and consider subscribing to my true crime channel. It actually helps me out a lot. And I appreciate you guys and all your support, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.